Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are getting off the Bruce train, though I'm sure he will come up, as he often does. And we're talking to my new friend, Benny. Benny is a musician. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, this sounds like a fun podcast to do." Sent me a
Yeah,
link to his music, and I liked what I heard. So, Benny, welcome to the podcast.
thanks. I feel welcome, Jesse. How you doing?
I am great. Tell us a little about yourself.
Sure, man. Where to start? Because it's all about music. We should talk about music, huh?
I'm going to start with where you grew up and what kind of music you
Sure.
listen to. So that's my
Yeah.
first question. For now, just
Beautiful.
talk a little bit about you. What you want to give your elevator pitch for the music?
Oh man, I don't even have an elevator pitch to the music. I made a whole bunch of music in a relatively short amount of time, and I've been working on recording it and producing it and releasing it. Up till now, there's 45 songs released, 9 EPs, 5 songs each. Half the songs are instrumental. I play violin and viola, electric bass, guitar. So half the songs are instrumental, little kind of interludes, and then half the songs are vocal. Some are very rough, low grade production on purpose. Some are a little bit more fancy, if you will. But all of it really comes from my heart. And this whole project is all about me recovering from the loss of my father, who died of terminal cancer, and understanding how to use music to bottle up some of those emotions. So some of it is a little bit raw, a little bit direct, but all from my heart, that's for sure.
I love that. I
Just bring
think
it down right in the first few
no,
minutes. Everyone's like, oh,
yeah, no. When people ask me what the podcast is about, I
yeah,
say, because I'll get often people, I don't know anything about Bruce Springsteen. I don't know if I can be on your podcast. And I
yeah,
say, my podcast is about the power of
mm,
music because
yeah,
music
yeah,
is how we celebrate, it's how we
yes,
heal, it's how we mourn, it's how we fall in love, it's how we recover from divorces. And so let's just keep it dark. 2017, I was diagnosed with colon cancer,
wow,
and I'm going through the stages of, okay, I went to the hospital. We think you
yeah,
have a tumor. We think it's cancerous. It is cancerous. And
yeah,
so on a Sunday afternoon, the cardiologist says, I don't know if your heart's strong enough to
wow,
do surgery. And my wife and I had just had a huge fight because she was
unrelated, I
upset.
assume.
Yeah, she was upset and worried and just doing it. So I was there and I grabbed my phone and I created an F cancer playlist. Of course, I spelled out the F. And I started just putting songs in it,
Yeah,
just songs that I had in my directory. And had surgery. Surgery went great. And the next stage is chemo. And I am a big reader, I'm a big podcast listener,
mm,
but all I did during chemo, and my wife went to the first one. And afterwards, I said, "Hey, if it's okay with you, I think I'm just going to go by myself." And she goes, "No, whatever you need." I said, "That way." And so I just got there and I put on my headphones and I played nothing but music as
mm,
they were throwing that chemicals in my body. Not a podcast, didn't watch a TV show,
yeah,
nothing. It was just music. And it just I we will talk a little bit more because I have some more to talk about you losing your father, and I'm sorry for that.
yeah.
So let's start at the beginning. Hopefully happier
Sure.
times. Where did you grow
Yes,
up?
much happier
And
to. I actually
yeah,
have an EP called A Happy Childhood and a really happy childhood.
yeah.
And quite often people say to me like, "Oh, that must be ironic, right? You didn't have a happy childhood." I'm like, "Oh, actually, I had a really happy childhood." House was full of music. I grew up playing violin. My sister played viola. My brother played cello, and I really wanted to play the viola, which, for those who don't know, a viola is the same shape as a violin, slightly larger body, and a lower pitch. It sits in between the violin and the cello in a string quartet. type arrangement. I really wanted to play viola, but I was a little bit too small, so I started on violin. And as soon as I became old enough, I switched to viola. I switched when I was 14, but so viola has always been important to me. My father was the biggest music fan, but not a music snob. You know what I mean, Jesse?
Yes.
Probably how you are too, I imagine, where
Yeah.
if it resonates with you, you listen to it. If it doesn't
Yes.
resonate with you, critics, maybe a critic being interested in something gets you to listen to it, but if it doesn't resonate, it doesn't make the cut. He had a very large record collection and then he switched to CDs. He had a very large CD collection and then he took hundreds and hundreds of CDs one by one and he digitized them and put them on an iPod. And then he was an iPod guy. So lots of touching music, listening music on repeat. If you liked an album, you might end up hearing it 5 times in a single day at pretty excruciating volumes sometimes. So I grew up in this household where you'd be like, we're going to listen to Cuban jazz for 2 weeks straight. There's no other music in the whole world. And then it's going to be John Hyatt, just weeks and weeks of John Hyatt. And then just really going through all sorts of stuff. He was originally from South Africa and he lived in Israel in the 60s. So there's lots of Middle Eastern music, there's lots of African music, there's lots of American music. And that's the environment I grew up in, always music. And all of my first emotions were coming from the speakers. I remember being young and not really understanding that they were coming from inside my brain. You understand what I mean? Like you
Yes,
feel
I do.
something
Yeah.
and there's music playing and you go, that music's making me feel something. Why? Why would I feel that? And then you're like, oh, that's the environment I grew up in. And then as I got into high school, I started to play more and more music. My brother started a band and I was played bass in his band. And then I joined jazz band and I joined marching band. And music was the way that I socialized with my friends. We used to go to concerts all the time, 2, 3 times a week. And I was so excited about music that I only wanted to go to one school. I wanted to go to the Berklee College of Music in Boston because it seemed the least stuffy and the most interdisciplinary of all the music schools that I looked at, which it is in a certain sense. It was many years ago now. I'm not sure exactly how people view it these days, but and so when I was 18, I went to music school and I spent 3 years just completely immersed in all sorts of musical traditions and styles. And at the end of it, I realized that I wasn't very good at music. I got the exact wrong impression, maybe, or the wrong thing, or maybe the right thing. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I just left there being like, wow, there are a lot of people that are way better than me. And that's a bummer. Bummer
I
because that's not what music's about
yeah.
almost at all. So it wasn't until years later where I really came back to it strong. And that's where my dad getting sick and that whole thing started.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. Couple things. One, you mentioned where did you grow up?
Oh, Southern California in Orange
Okay.
County.
Okay. So you wanted to go to school across the country.
I just wanted to do music. I didn't really
Yeah.
think too much about where it was. Yeah. But yeah,
And
I went to school all there across the country.
and by the way, your story about not being good makes me think of the Harry Chapin song, Mr. John Tanner. Gosh, now I'm drawing a blank. John, yeah, John Tanner. Oh, Mr. Tanner. It's the premise is this dry cleaner, and it's based on a true story. Dry cleaner sang all the time while he cleaned clothes. And everyone talked about how wonderful his voice was. You should just do this professional, use your professional. And a guy, so this happened in real life. You booked a hall, and the critics basically said you weren't up to contemporary standards.
Sure.
And then the song is he never sang out loud again, except very late at night when the shop was closed. Yeah, Mr. Tanner, you should listen to it. It'll break
Yeah.
your heart because music was his life. It was not his livelihood. It made him singing made him sing so happy, made him feel so good. He didn't know why he sing. He just know it made him whole.
Yeah.
And I I love that. Sad for you, right? That you got that
No,
feeling.
I don't think it's sad at all. I
Yeah.
think it's I think that with almost everything in life, there's a there. What do people say? There, like friendship, you'd be like, there's a friend for a reason, and there's a friend for a season. Back in the
Yeah.
olden days, people had rhymes for everything. I think that what I realized was that music was a nice to have, but I didn't need it because
Okay.
music was, as I said a few minutes ago, that's how you socialized, but that's also how you socialize yourself. So that the thing that we had, I'm 40, so I'm a millennial, so we grew up CD players and cars. You look slightly older than me, so you grew up
My first was
whatever,
an 8-track in the
eight
car.
track in a car or a radio.
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
listen to a lot of radio
Yes.
too. The socialization part is the hey, listen to this song, or someone says,
Yes.
listen to this. Hey, have you ever heard the Bad Brains? About who? Let me play them for you. This
Right.
is crazy. I don't understand this at all. Let me explain it to you, or whatever it is. And thinking through all of my early musical experiences, it's always socialization. First time you hear something, it grates on the ears. Fifth time, your older brother plays it, you like it. Okay, now you want your own CD. Oh, but you get a different album. Then your brother goes, oh, you got that other album. Let me listen to that. That's basically all of young adult life for the most part.
Yeah.
Can't really do that with movies. You can
Yeah.
share a movie with someone, but maximum it's like one movie a day if you're
Yeah.
really crazy. Music, you could do 4 or 5. So
Yeah.
I got all the socialization benefits of music, but at the end of the day, I even went out and played bass on tour with a Sony artist after music school. And just part of me was just like, you know what? There's another chapter that I gotta discover. And in that time, it didn't even require looking back. I would strum guitar now and again, listen to music and enjoy it, but it just didn't. It was latent. It was sleeping in a sense. And then
Oh,
when the rush of emotions come, that's when you realize,
yeah. When you talked about you decided that maybe, as you put it, you're not quite good enough. So what was your day gig? What did you start doing for,
it's interesting to talk about it now
yeah.
because it seems so obvious. But in 2009, 2010, I started a social media content creation company,
Okay.
and I built it and I sold it when I was relatively young, which is a
Yeah.
funny thing to do now because when I tell young people, that's, I don't know, having some sort of the most obvious business on the planet because there's hundreds and hundreds, but it
Yeah.
was actually quite novel at the time.
Yeah,
So
I
I
bet it
started a company,
was.
and most of my clients were in the music industry, so that was the zone that I was in. But there's other layers to the story too. I got really interested in Japan, and I studied Japanese, and I went to Japan. I studied for a year, and after I studied for a year, then I came back and went and played bass on tour with the Sony artist. And while I was on tour, that's when social media started to become very prominent. And so I actually started a company in Japan that did Japanese language social media pages for Western artists. And I made deals with Universal and Sony and Warner and all the major labels to handle the social media pages. And this was back when we literally were doing like Taylor Swift and Lady Gaga and Beyonce and all these huge artists. But now
Yeah.
they wouldn't let people like me touch it with the 100-foot pole. But like at the time, I
Yeah.
was like, sure, you want to run their Twitter? Go. And I think almost all those pages are still running.
Oh, fun.
Granted, but it's a funny thing to have done that all those years ago. But
Yeah.
that's what I did. So I was connected to music, but loosely, and I wasn't really invested in it emotionally. I took some time off from that feeling for sure.
So you've always loved it, and it became quote unquote your job, right? Social media, preferring.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's not really music.
yeah.
That's auxiliary for sure.
The peripheral part of
Yeah.
it.
This comes to like the whole thing.
Yeah.
Music people, music people really care about the music, right?
Yeah.
And people that are just using music for socialization or socializing tend to care a lot more about the person and what they said and what they posted and what they look like and all these other things. Sure, you might see an album cover and be like, I should check this out. But you might be repulsed in 5 seconds and not listen to it. It doesn't matter who says to you, no, it's really good. You should really like it. You don't like it, you don't like it. But I think music people really care about the music. So posting on social media, interesting, related. Maybe it got me a little bit of credibility because I had a music footing, but I don't consider that really core to the music. Now, there were a few times where I did some songwriting stuff and I did some lyric translation, and there are stuff that got a little bit closer to the music, but that wasn't really my main thing.
Benny, as you're going through your secondary education, by the way,
Yeah,
thank you for the shout out to John Hyatt. That's one of my other podcasts.
I know.
Yeah, thank you for that love. Were there bands that you continued to feel affection for that were continued to be part of the soundtrack of your life?
One of the artists that I still can't get over properly is Bob Dylan, which I think is such a common, it's almost a cliche, but the sort of enigmatic appeal remains. I don't know if you feel it for Bob or if you're a different camp. What do you think?
So Bob is one of those that I feel like every time I start doing a deep dive, I'm fascinated by it. And I truly know that I need to do more work with him. It is, I'll pull up some songs and we'll just be blown away by it.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, I was a child of the 70s.
sure. When
Graduated high
all the
school.
best music,
Yeah,
all the best music was made in the 70s.
I graduated high school in 1977, and my parents were into music, but they were into mostly country music.
Yeah,
From
lots of
South.
good country in the 70s.
Yes. And so Charlie Pride and Merle Haggard
Yeah,
and
yeah.
Johnny Cash and everything. And my first control of music was the AM clock radio that was next to my bed. It's where I could put it on the rock station and listen. So
Who was on the
hearing,
radio then? What, Van Halen,
so
Rush probably was.
yeah,
Where'd
and
you grow
there's
up?
yeah, so Southwest Louisiana, so a lot of Elton
Louisiana. Okay.
John,
Oh yeah.
Queen, Barry Manilow, Paul Anka, the OJs, the
Yeah.
Bee Gees, the Casey and the Sunshine Band, Fleetwood Mac, Eagles, just this mixture of in the 70s on that AM station, you'd hear Ray Stevens doing The Streak, and then you'll hear Boston Turner Overdrive, and then
Yeah.
just all these different mixes. Had no idea when Manfred Mann, Blinded by the Light, no idea that this guy Bruce Springsteen had written that song. So I connect to that and I feel that.
Yeah.
And my first musical obsession is in 1977. I graduated from high school. I didn't have anything to do on a Saturday night. I went to the local mall just looking for friends or looking to visit. Ended up going to a Montgomery Ward's, which is like a
Okay.
Sears, and they had a
Yeah.
music shop and they had Endless Summer from the Beach Boys on 8-track on sale. And I
Amazing.
picked up that 8-track and had never heard music like that and fell in love with Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys.
Pet Sounds is one of the albums that I've always listened to. I mean, at
Yeah.
least once every 3, 4 months, if
Yeah.
not more frequently.
Yeah.
And
And
the thing is that it never ceases to surprise. And surprise for me is one of the elements of music that I cherish the most.
yeah, in fact, when we talk about Nebraska, Bruce's
Mm,
song,
sure, yeah.
the album that, where he did just on the cassette and just him, his guitar and harmonica, and people tell the story when they first hear it. Some people immediately got it. Other people like, what is this? I don't get this. And I say, I'm buying all these Beach Boy 8-tracks And when I pick up Pet Sound, I'm like, what the hell is this? There's no surf music. There's
Yeah.
instrumentals. What is this? And I now probably, if I had to pick one album, it would probably be Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
And for that very reason, that every time I listen to it, and it's only 40, 45 minutes beginning to
Yeah.
end, but it is something about putting on Pet Sounds, headphones in a dark room, and just hearing that is pretty special.
It's the album is it's one of those albums, at least for me, where the lore didn't come before the listening, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Listen to it one time. That's really interesting. I'll listen to it again. And this is internet's there, but people weren't. It's
Right.
hard. Again, we all know, but it only became a main focus like in the last 5, 6 years for everyone. For a long time, it was just a place that you could go for a little bit,
Yeah.
and that was that. Never even occurred to me to think I should learn more about this. And then later, when I did learn about it, it was aha. So Brian Wilson was actually trying to communicate this to me over
Yeah.
to us. It,
Yeah.
all the sort of auxiliary sounds and the way it comes together and the way that it's written in like a very young perspective. The parents play a part in it and the teenage feelings, but he's not a teenager anymore. So it's this throwback for him and he's pulling these emotions out. And then you understand that Brian's a little bit of as a very like childish soul and all these things. You're just like, wow, this is amazing. It is, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I think that I think it's very difficult if you learn about the lore before you listen.
Yeah.
It's actually, I find it a little bit harder to connect to the music because
Yeah.
I'm dealing with the words that I was told about it before. There are
Yeah.
other bands that I listened to before I understood them that really connected with me more.
Yeah. A couple, gosh, probably 10, 15 years ago, back when Netflix was, they sent you the little CD in the mail.
Yeah.
So I rented the original Day the Earth Stood Still.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm like, oh, this is a classic. So I'm putting it in, and all of a sudden, the movie's over, and I go, oh my God, that was a good movie. Not because someone told me it was supposed to be, it just,
Yeah.
it was a good movie. I was engaged, and I'm like, this is awesome. So yeah, it is that every once in a while that and it's hard not to go
Yeah.
through the hype.
It's hard. But it's funny. I constantly am surprised at
Yeah.
how much amazing music there is that is
Yeah.
also widely regarded as very good. And that sounds like a
Yeah.
silly thing to say because it's the least contrarian thing you could possibly say. But
Right.
on last Friday, I went and saw Beethoven's only opera at the Met here, Fidelio.
Hmm.
And it's a fantastic opera. Is the libretto kind of silly? Yeah. Is the second act resolved the whole thing like in the first few minutes and then they just been like praise us, everything's great for 45 minutes? Yeah, but it's amazing. And you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, Beethoven only wrote one opera and it's awesome. Who would have thought? But then you
Yeah.
think it's lasted hundreds of years, they're still performing it. Like obviously there's something to it, but you're right. I think the true mark is you're listening and then you forget you're listening and it's just moving you. And I think that's at the end of the day, music, it really resonates in the brain in a way unlike anything else. I had this thought, Jesse. I'm curious your thoughts. I don't know. It was like one of those. Have you ever seen the Reddit called like shower thoughts? R
Okay.
slash shower thoughts. It's like people think of things that
Okay.
they think of in the shower. I was in the shower, but I had this thought. I thought, is music fiction or nonfiction? You know what I mean? And if you think
Yeah.
about Bruce, think about Thunder Road or anything like that. I don't want to spoil your final question about Thunder Road, but
Yeah.
we know it's fiction because Bruce didn't get his driver's license until he was in his 40s.
exactly. Yeah, or something
right?
like
So
ridiculous. Yeah.
so we know it's fiction, or it's fiction from the first person perspective. But I read a lot of Japanese literature. There's a whole genre of Japanese literature that's about I. It's called, like, in Japanese, they call it like I literature, because it's from the perspective of I, although it can be totally absurd. And the author is the I, but it's not the author. That's a pretty simple thing to start a story, but it's all from the perspective of I. I did this, I did that. Then I did 3 backflips and jumped off the roof. And you're like, wait a minute, who did it? But
Yeah.
so you have this I character, but it's fiction. The lyrics are fiction, but it represents such a visceral reality, and it touches your brain in such a different way than reading fiction. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. Plus, music itself without any lyrics, I guess it must be fiction, but it's not. It's very real. I don't know. Anyway, it's a silly thing. I'll work on that thought. But what do you think
Yeah,
about it?
no, I think that's a very interesting thought. Jason Isbell, who I think is a brilliant songwriter,
I think he's a brilliant songwriter too. Yes.
said in an interview that one of the things that frustrates him is when you're a songwriter, everyone thinks every song is about you.
Yeah.
And the other thing he said is that he found the more personal he got in his subjects, the more universal the themes became. So that's the two sides of the same coin. And it is the lucky enough to never have, I'm pretty much a non drinker, but I've never
Mm.
had a substance abuse issue.
Neither have I. I'm a lifelong non-drinker myself.
Yeah. But when he sings about recovery,
Mm.
I have had to fight recovery on either my weight or
Sure.
bad decisions or whatever. We all are fighting our own struggles. Similar to John Hyatt is very
Mm.
open about his sobriety journey. And
Sure.
often the songs that are about that speak to me in a different way. So yeah, I think that is. And one of the things that we're going to talk about your music in a minute, but
Sure.
when I first really got into Bruce Springsteen, and this was 2002, is when I went and saw him perform live for the first time. And that's when I went from I'm a fan to, oh my goodness, I'm a fan. And my wife, who we've been together over 40 years, said, I don't understand anything he says. I can't understand any word. He growls too much. And so what I asked her to do, I said, is I want you to think of his voice as just another instrument. Remember the old Peter and Wolf that we
Yeah,
would
of
listen to in
course.
elementary school, right? That in each instrument played a different animal and it told the
Yep.
story. I said, I want you, his voice, to just pretend it's a horn or it's a violin, it's a piano. I said, and just listen to the emotion of the song. And that is how she got to enjoy Bruce. And then
Yeah.
later, once she understood the emotion, she would go back and get the lyrics and study them. So I do think that it's emotionally true,
Yeah.
whether it's factually true or not. And sometimes the most startling nonfiction is fiction. And sometimes the most crazy fiction is something nonfiction.
But don't you think that if you think of someone like Bruce, fans have a very close relationship with Bruce Springsteen, and
Yes.
the he's he seems to be very open about the facts of his own life.
Yes.
And that creates an opportunity to draw contrasts like the one I just made. He never even got his driver's license, so whatever,
Yeah.
that kind of BS, which is neither here nor there. It's honestly just like
Yeah.
whatever. Interestingly, someone like Bob Dylan, he would never really share anything about himself. We almost know nothing. He wrote a book that was a strange thing, but that was much, much later anyway. So we don't really know the things. Oh, I think this song's about that. And his response to those things is always just another way to twist it around and be like, I wrote that song before I got divorced or after I
Yeah.
got divorced. So how would that make any sense? Or something. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, is that true? And someone, of course, that's not true. What's he talking? But
Yeah.
so the sort of the by removing the is this autobiography or not question, it makes it at least it casts it in a different light. I'm not sure exactly what it does or doesn't do, but it definitely
Yeah.
casts it in a different light.
So Penn tells the story. He's a huge Dylan fan. And he said that the mythos
Mm,
is that Bob took his broken heart, opened the veins, and blood on the track. Just he poured out his heart, and blood on the tracks came out fully formed like a Greek
sure.
myth, right? He says, then when you go to the Dylan Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which I've gone to and absolutely loved, there are notebooks filled with notes and lyrics and changes about every song on that album. And he said they're both true, right?
Yeah.
It's both true that he put it together note by note and just did this, but also it was an emotional purge. So I think it's amazing. So,
Pretty wild.
yeah, what about the viola and why did you want that instrument? I meant to ask you that at the very beginning of the interview.
So the without getting too silly into it, do you play any instruments, by the way?
I do not. It is one of my
Okay.
deep regrets is that and I'm 65 and I know it's not too old, but I just haven't taken the time to do it. But no, I
What
have a little
instrument?
bit.
What instrument speaks to you the most?
So if and someone said this to me once, I if I could go back in time, I would learn to play the guitar. My
Okay.
dad played the guitar often,
What are you
and
talking about? Acoustic guitar?
yeah, acoustic guitar, and he would play it for us, and he would sing. And I remember when I was 10 or 11, friends of my dad's would come over and there would be, the house would be covered in cigarette smoke, like the biggest bar. And the guys would all be, hey, you take one. And they would all just be playing guitars and singing and doing. And someone said the reason I want to play guitar with my dad
Yeah.
is part of the reason why maybe I haven't learned now is I don't necessarily want to learn how to play the guitar. I just want to go back and play with my dad.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
So with any time you talk to anyone who can play any instrument with any level of proficiency, there's usually an original moment. And
okay,
it's an interesting idea. You might find someone that's like a concert flute player, which they would call a
okay,
concert flute player, and they say, "Oh, I was watching TV and there was a classical concert, and they showed the flute player, and I thought I heard the flute, and I said, oh my gosh." So there's something about specific tones or specific tone qualities that really grab young people. And for some people, it's an acoustic guitar. Some people it might be a distorted guitar. They might hear Jimi Hendrix and their head might explode. They might hear Van Halen and their head might explode. Or they might hear
yeah,
Itzhak Perlman play the violin and they're just like, oh my gosh. I fell in love with the viola hearing my sister play it. And she was a kid too, so it wasn't especially good. But there's something about the viola that attracts a certain kind of weirdo. And the viola itself has a kind of muted, in betweenish timbre.
okay,
A violin really sings, it resonates very big and bright. And a cello also resonates very big. And they say it's most like the human voice. And the viola kind of sits in the middle. It doesn't really resonate that much. So
okay,
something muted, a little bit tampered down about it. A lot of middle voice kind of thing. Anyway, it actually has a lot in common with my singing voice. And
okay,
there's a lot of viola on my albums. And it sounds just like a deadened instrument, like a deadened
okay.
string instrument. So I don't know, somehow it resonated with my brain in a very primal way. And I always wanted to be able to play it.
So let's talk. You've drifted away from music. Though
Yeah,
you were on the side, but talk to me how your father's illness kind of brought you back to this. Tell me
sure.
that story if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. The His story is very similar to yours, except when he was diagnosed with cancer, it was terminal
Okay.
because it was in his brain. They did brain surgery and they tell you very soon after, actually, it's terminal cancer, he's going to die. 18 months, maybe 2 years to live. I think he lived 19 months from diagnosis to the end. And the issue with dying is one thing. The sort of protracted waiting to die thing is a very weird thing. And maybe you've experienced it in other realms of your life.
Yes.
It is just one of the oddest possible things. I don't think humans really are designed for certain calamity protracted over months and months. It really stirs a lot of strange emotions because as you want to get past discomfort, but the way past discomfort of someone you love who you know is going to die is the absence of them.
Yeah.
So, in this sort of odd emotional state, I really had a lot of emotions that I'd never felt because I had a pretty happy childhood, a pretty happy go lucky, didn't really have too many difficulties in any way, shape, or form. And suddenly, the person that I looked up to the most was in this bind, this dead but alive but dead, very healthy, very happy, dying scenario. So I basically turned to the only thing that I knew that you can like bottle emotions with, which is music. And you start, obviously, you listen a lot. And then decided to spend time alone. And I rented a practice space down the street from my apartment. And every Thursday and every Sunday, I would go with my acoustic guitar and I'd strum and I'd record a little bit and I'd sing a little bit and I'd spend time alone writing and thinking and things like that. And then I started to finish songs, if that makes sense. And I started to finish more and more songs, and I started to understand how these could be bound together in little EPs that are like 15, 20 minutes each, sometimes a little bit shorter with the interludes. And I started to play more viola in that space. And I started to got some microphones, got my act together to produce the music. And largely it's because given quiet and time, music very easily filled the space. And I really didn't hold back in terms of the music I was making. The songs are about parents and about death and about children dying, about parents dying and mothers disappearing and my own dad dying, and like very specific songs about that. And then halfway through the whole sequence, I brought my dad's voice into it. This was after he had passed away, and I orchestrated him talking about his own death. I really went deep on this and didn't think very hard about how weird it would feel to have my own emotions laid out in that way. But I'm glad I did it. That's for sure. But you can tell how it's years ago and I never really talked about it. I just put the music out and didn't worry too much about it. And it's just now that I feel like I'm ready to see if this kind of conversation resonates with anybody at all.
Why, what determines if it's going to be an instrumental or if it's going to have vocals?
So almost all the vocal songs start with a vocal sort of words and a melodic framework that sort of fits the words, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
The instrumental songs, I started with a basic sonic palette. And I had a real sense that it wasn't going to be like a verse chorus kind of thing. Most of the instrumental songs are very short, they're interludes, really. And they have like an A, B format. Some of them don't even return to A. So it has a very unfinished quality. And I never really thought,
What
oh, this melody is so good, I should
what
sing it. It just came through
When you say
on the strings.
A-B format, what does that mean?
Sure. If you take one part of a song and there's another part that contrasts with it in some way, you can just label them A or B,
Okay, got it.
like the A section and the B section.
Okay.
Typically, in most popular music, a B might be the chorus, and it might be A B A A C if there's a bridge or something, and then like a whole bunch of choruses at the end. It's a pretty common way to do it. So I'm just saying B in that
Yeah,
sense.
got you. No. Okay. And so was this subconsciously working on your grief, or did you know what you were doing? Or maybe a combination of
Well, I
both?
didn't. So, it's funny that grief is part of it, but also there's real trauma involved in these things. Is because your perfectly healthy father suddenly has stroke-like symptoms. You get a call, that whole thing. Then there's the hospital, and then there's the brain scan, and then there's a tumor in the brain. So that hits you with wait, we have to do emergency brain surgery. That hits you with wait. You're worried because brain surgery is obviously as all surgery is very scary. And then you're sitting in the waiting room, and the doctor comes out and says, we remove the tumor, but I'm fairly sure it's terminal cancer. So that hits you. Then you have to wait for your father to wake up. You know he's going to die before he knows he's going to die. All these things basically are traumatizing, then re-traumatize you, and then you have to deal with someone who's dying in no way. Although my dad handled it very well for the most part, and then all the way at the very end of this, he dies with us. So then you have to deal with actual death. I was walking around with all of the weight that everyone has felt. It's the most human thing on the planet since we probably for 10,000 years, since we stopped being Neanderthals or whatever, we've had to deal with this. So I was very aware that there were all these sort of things that I wasn't ready to talk about, wasn't really ready to face. And so I'd slip them in to the music. An example of that is in my first EP, there's a song called Fair Detective. And there's a line, a frozen face I've seen before. And in the song, children wash up dead in the river, and the detective is trying to figure out what happened. That's the sort of premise for the song. And a frozen face I've seen before. The first dead person I ever saw was my own father, which is natural. So, what do you do with that image seared into your brain? Sure, you could go to therapy, you could describe it and talk about it and try to normalize it. It's not a thing you should really normalize, but locking it into a song, for me, that was a really natural place to put it. The detective has seen dead bodies before. And in the song, I am the detective. Or you have to
Yeah,
have a point of view for every song.
yeah, I
So
get
I'm
you.
the detective and I'm referencing that for myself. So that's an example of just taking that sort of image that I couldn't really process properly and locking it into the song, if that makes sense. And another
It,
layer to this is the song's about children dying, and children dying to me at the time clearly was far more tragic than a parent dying. And that sort of that contextualizing the tragedy was really important to me to teach myself. Look, it's natural. Yes, he died young. Yes, it's sad, but it's not unnatural in a certain sense. So like all these ways, I'm like weaving it into these songs, slipping them in there for myself, really. So it was very clear to me where all this was coming from.
the so little over 2 years ago, my mother had a stroke, and they rushed her to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to try to, or actually New Orleans, to save her life. And even though she had a DNR, the doctor was like, no, we really do we need to operate on her.
Wow.
We, and so we spent over 2 years, her in a nursing home, not being able to move her left arm or her left leg. And just
Mm.
for 2 years, she could do almost nothing. For the longest time, they wouldn't let her eat or drink. She was living off a tube. And
Wow.
we were like, everything that she loved about life is gone. She can't
Hmm.
cook. She was always proud to live by herself. And so then my brother got sick and his cancer happened very quickly. And
Mm.
so we ended up losing him. And it then we had the tough decision of, do you tell your mom, who was
Yeah,
mentally
that's tough.
struggling, that, she'd lost her son?
Yeah.
So we made the decision to lie to her.
Okay.
Just nope. And luckily she would not ask about him that often. Dean was a truck driver, so he was on the road a lot. And so it made sense he didn't see her that much. And then the week before she died, she told my sister, "Oh, Dean came and saw me." And
Wow.
my sister said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah. How'd he look?" "Oh, he looked the best he's ever looked. We talked
Wow.
for hours." And she goes, "I'm mad at you." And Rita's, "What are you mad about?" "I didn't have my purse. I wanted to give him money for a meal." And mom's, Rita's, "Dean can afford his own lunch." "No, I don't care. When you're a parent, you want to buy your child a meal." But she goes, "It
Wow.
was great seeing him." And then we just cry. We know she's going to be gone shortly. And
That's fascinating.
yeah, it was,
It's interesting because you gave her peace of mind, but you also gave her the opportunity to have the whatever people call the visions that people have before they
yeah.
die.
And Benny, it is not me to say whether that was in her mind
Mm,
or she actually saw him. It doesn't matter. To her, it was real.
that's
And
100% right. Yeah.
and so when we knew it was close, I drove to Louisiana and spent about an hour and a half at her bedside, and she could barely talk. I don't think she even knew I was there, but I knew I was there and got to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And Bruce Springsteen's latest studio album, Letter to You, is all about death and endings. And it's a very powerful, "I will see you in my dreams, where all our
Mm.
summers have come to end. I'll see you in my dreams, for death is not the end, and I will see you in my dreams." When I saw my brother the last time, and I knew this probably was the last time I listened to that song and that music. So obviously nothing takes away the pain, but it sounds like creating the music has helped heal. Yes.
Certainly. I think that music, that's actually what it's for.
Yeah.
I think that's actually what it's for. It's a it's as close to a real life dream catcher type thing you could ever imagine because it touches the brain on so many levels that it can scoop up whole swaths of infinite feeling emotions in its sort of grasp in a way. When you write music, that just gives you the opportunity to put even more of that feeling and intention into it. It's not to say that all music has to be like that. Music can be fun and frivolous and silly,
Sure.
and that's fine too, for sure. But I think that that's really what music is for, especially more modern music, because I don't think it's quite the same with forms of other music. And I'm not 100% sure if that's the way people thought about Gregorian chant or something like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Maybe they did, or thousands of years ago. I don't know.
Yeah.
But certainly with modern music, it is a therapeutic device in a certain direct way.
What do you want to do next with your music, Benny?
I'm finishing the 50 songs that constitute the Muted Circus project. There's some songs that I might want to re-record and do an album. So I'm thinking about that. I spend a lot of time these days playing piano, playing keyboard, and writing shorter and interesting to me at least, instrumental pieces. So I think probably I will not be moving on from music forever. And I'm looking forward to you learning to play guitar
Thank you,
as
my
well.
friend.
You can do it.
Yes, I know. If someone wants, where's a good place to start with your music, Benny?
It depends how heavy. If you like the heavy part of this conversation, you can start with the song Wait for What, which is literally about waiting for someone to die, and the EP that's on. If you're interested in the Fair Detective stuff, you can listen to the Fair Detective, which is an acoustic song that I put out on my very first EP. You can listen on Spotify, you can listen on Apple Music, anywhere. I put them on YouTube too. Yeah, give it a listen.
So before I get to the Mary question, I always like to throw this out there. What should I have asked you that I haven't, Benny?
Oh, that's a tricky question. I think you did a good job. Or is this not an assessment?
But it's no, it's always, I am always honored and flattered when someone says that. When someone says that they had a good time and they felt the conversation was worthy, then I feel like I'm doing what I
Well,
need
I
to do.
think I think the conversation. I think you sharing your own personal stories really make sense.
Thank you, sir.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Yeah. I'm going to let you plug away in a minute, but before we do, I end every podcast with what I call the Mary question.
Yeah.
And if you are a fan of Benny's music and you're checking out this podcast, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'm going to try to convince him to get on the John Hyatt podcast next. So Sylvan and I can have you break down a song. But Jay Armstrong was a honors English teacher. He's now retired, but when he was teaching, he would give his students the lyrics to Thunder Road. They would read it as if it was a poem, talk about the imagery and the themes Bruce explores in the song. And then at the end of the class, he would ask his students, does Mary get in the car? So, Benny, that was your homework. And
I did
what
my
is your,
homework.
okay, good. What is your
Most
thought?
people answer just one line. Do they just like she got in the car
It's very few
or
people,
she
and the
didn't get in the
ones that
car?
do, I say, do you want to explain your answer? Most
I
people
yeah.
say, I have thoughts. Like
Yes,
I
yeah. That
want to
okay,
get,
that's how
yeah,
I am too.
yeah.
So the I like to think about this is getting a little bit nerdy, but I
I
like to
love it.
think about what world does the song exist in and what world does the song not exist in? And usually when I frame things that way, one pulls stronger than the other.
Okay.
So, in other words, is Mary getting into the car, or let's say, is Mary not getting into the car so significant that Bruce would write a song about that night? Or is Mary getting in the so significant that Bruce would write a song about that night? That's where my brain goes. However, when I read the lyrics, you know what they say, it's like first thought, best thought, or something. In my head, she was already in the car, and maybe that's how
Interesting.
it was when you listen to, because there's a lot of movement in the song. There's her coming from the porch. I'm doing it from memory, so I'm sure there's more that I'm
Yeah.
forgetting. There's her coming from the porch. There's movement from the front seat to the back seat of the car,
Yep.
and because of that two-part, sorry, a really car is going by. Is that bleeding into the mic? Can you hear
No,
it?
you're good. Yeah.
Okay. Because of the sort of two-part movement, and it feels a lot like there's more urging happening on the front seat to the back seat movement. So I felt like she's in the car, but there's a convincing that hasn't taken place where they're doing the thing that you do in the car. They're talking about stuff, and whether they drive away or don't drive away or whatever. But she's in the car. She's in the car. He saw her leave the porch. She gets in the car, and they're talking, and he's, let's go out to Thunder Road or whatever. Let's
Yep.
go out there and do our thing out there. And that's where the real conversation is happening. So I would say she gets in the car for sure, not necessarily that she speeds away.
That's a great
And I think
answer.
that the closeness of him getting what he wants, but not getting what he wants, is the world in which the song gets written.
I love that. I love that. It's a great answer. All right, Benny. So you already mentioned you're available on Spotify,
Yeah,
iTunes
anywhere.
Music. Tell us what's the best way to reach you if they want to.
If you want to send me an email, you can send it to mutedcircus@mutedcircus.com anytime. Yeah, hit follow on Spotify, whatever,
All right.
whatever your jam is.
Very
Think of me
nice.
once a quarter.
There
There'll be
we go.
something for you, I promise.
Any final thoughts?
Thank you so much. This is really fun.
I am very glad. I agree. Listeners, go check out the music. I am going to do more of a deep dive. I really loved your instrumentals. I really thought they were beautiful, and I want to do some more deep dives. So thank you for that, my friend.
Thank
And
you. Have a good evening.
yes, listeners, go check it out. Let them know what you heard. And everyone, remember to be safe and to be kind. And we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.